on Twitch. And I was very, very happy with that. Does VODT not have one specific for Dark Souls 3? I don't want the walk. Wait, what? Okay. Hold on, I take offense to this. So we don't do a lot of these React videos on the channel for a reason, because most of the time it's just all about gaming, and I am not going to change that. My channel is always going to more or less be very, very, very focused on gaming. But I did see this last night after we got off stream before I went to bed, and I wanted to give my perspective on it because we did play through Dark Souls 3, and I feel like I had a very, very different perspective on what bosses were the absolute hardest. So, of course, there's rankings for all of these. You're going to have a bunch of channels that are always like, oh, bosses, hardest to best, Final Fantasy's best to worst, blah, 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 blah. But I've never done one of these myself, and I've never looked into what people thought about Dark Souls 3, which, in my opinion, was one of the better Dark Souls experiences that I had. Between Dark Souls 1 Remastered and between Dark Souls 3, I'm still leaning on 3. So, this section for us is going to be reacting to one of those very nuanced and overdone lists. This one is going to be, what is his name for this, real quick? This is going to be our reaction to the Democracy. Oh, I see what he did there. His list for the easiest to hardest Dark Souls 3 bosses. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun because my Dark Souls 3 experience was fucking painful. I got wrecked. For those people that were here for the Dark Souls 3 run, yo, I made some bosses that were supposed to be super easy looked like they were the end of the game DLC bosses. If you guys are interested in seeing just how much I got my shit kicked in, if you go to YouTube and you look up the Dark Souls 3 folder, you will notice that, like, the genuinely authentic exhilaration coming from me when a boss dies, you can't fake that. It was like 100 pulls in. You can't fake how fucking excited I was because I was actually just impressed that I made it die. So, for this block and for this part of the YouTube stuff, we are going to react to the Democracy, because we're going to react to another fucking easiest to hardest bosses in Dark Souls. So let's check that out real quick. Live scene! As always, for each one of these guys, this video's description is going to be in the video description, so people can go check out the original content, because this is me, again, extorting somebody else's hard work and their thoughts on this to make my own content. Am I doing the YouTube thing right? Is that how YouTube works? I'm pretty sure it's how YouTube works. Anyway, so this is his list. Let's see how he broke this down, because I have a very specific, just how bad these bosses sucked list. So I've never actually looked at one of these from even VODT. I think VODT has one for this, but I haven't actually looked at one of these from start to finish to see just how hard they think these bosses are. Spot on. So let's change this, since we are still technically just chatting, but also since it is Dark Souls 3, because I know that I want to keep it to task with this. And I know the Dark Souls 3 community probably has a lot of interesting information on what they think these bosses are. But let's jump into it. And after we're done hearing these thoughts, if I see one that just feels like it's out of place, I'm going to stop and give my 2 cents on it. Because some of these bosses, chat was like, why are you making this so hard? Why are you so bad at games? And I literally kept looking at my screen and I was like, how is this easy? Like, how is this actually easy? So let's jump into it. What's up, Radzik?
Hey everybody, my name's Democracy, and I want to welcome you back to our series ranking the Soulsborne boss difficulty.
I all of a sudden don't feel bad for saying this guy's name wrong, because he literally just sounded like he stuttered trying to say his own name. Moving on.
Our last entry in the series is the recently released Dark Souls 3. For our ranking survey, we got over 10,000 responses. That is absolutely incredible, and I am overjoyed with the amount of enthusiasm our community has shown for this series. With the game being so new, keep in mind that opinions are very fresh. The footage you're about to see comes from my first blind playthrough, so those of you disappointed with my lack of deaths in the earlier games are gonna love some of the later totals. With all that said, let's kick things off with number 19.
Yeah. Okay, this one's fair. This boss fight was an absolute joke. I honestly didn't think this was a boss fight. So he ain't wrong already.
Our first boss is the menaces that await you at the heart of the cathedral, and by that I mean they look kinda menacing. My first reaction walking in here was, what the, please no, FromSoft, you took the gang too far this time. I walked around killing them one by one before noticing the boss's HP wasn't budging, then I noticed the red light. So this is another one of those Royal Rat Vanguard or Celestial Emissary type fights. And those are always super easy, with this one being no different. Just like with the Emissary, at 50% HP the real boss will show his true nature. In this case, it's just another Deacon, but he's protected by the fattest bouncers you've ever seen. At this point, the fight is basically a matter of swatting away the flies to get to the boss, and it's not very hard as long as you employ hit and run tactics because the Deacons do really minimal damage.
So that's also not true. For this fight, if you did like I did and you farmed the dark sword, or if you had a long sword, you could literally just cut these guys down like grass. You literally didn't have to do much but keep swinging, and this fight was over. I was very upset with how easy this fight was, because just like he said, I walked into a room, and for those of you guys that have played Dark Souls, any Dark Souls, if you walk into a room and you see that many mobs, your first thought is, I'm dead. I'm so dead. Like, there's no way I get out of this. Whether it's skeletons, whether it's ghouls, whether it's fucking ghosts, whether it's those fucking wheels. If you walk into a room and you see that many things in front of you, you're like, oh, okay, FromSoft. This was really, like, not okay. Based on the bosses that come before and after Deacons, depending on your route, this was a huge letdown.
The only real concern in the fight is the potential to be cursed. I actually had no idea what was going on when the bar started filling up, but if it does, you just drop dead. But apparently all you have to do to stop the fog is kill the Deacons creating it. This means almost any difficulty in this fight has an easy workaround, so you can even take your time if you choose. You probably won't need to though, because once you understand how the fight works, it's a relative cakewalk.
Relative is being very nice about that.
So, this is the tale of two bosses.
This is unfair. Okay, so just to give some context on this fight. So when you get to this area, this is the area where the Nameless King is at. When you get to this area, if you are playing a blind playthrough or you're playing a first-time playthrough, I know blind is an acceptable term now. Completely understand that. Not gonna, split hairs with this. But when you get to this area, everything instantly hits harder. The snake guys that are up here have better weapons. They're doing a larger percentage of damage. And if you save this for closer to the end of your playthrough, for like the DLC part of it, you're pretty strong. And you jump into this area, and these ads are fucking whooping your ass, right? And then this guy flies in. You're like, okay, there's a dragon. You can see its feet. You can touch it. You can swing at it. So the troll for this fight is that chat gets you to try and kill the dragon while it's on the fucking ground when you first see it. The problem with this is that if you don't know the right way to kill it, you will sit here and swing at this dumbass dragon's feet for like an hour. I know because I did it. And chat, depending on who's in your chat, is going to let you do it. They're going to be like, oh man, you almost got him. You just got to try a little harder. Yeah, you do.
The first time I waltzed in here, I tried for about 10 minutes to get a good angle to melee the beast. This was a serious pain in the rear and almost resulted in my own death. I decided to bone out and take the fight on again. The second time I noticed that the area behind the dragon wasn't closed off and gave it a quick look. And then this is basically the fight.
He said 10 minutes. I spent almost an hour and 45 minutes on this fucking boss.
That's right, instead of actually fighting a boss, you'll be fighting the little dragon minions as you take a long trip around the arena. So once you do make it all the way around, you just plunge into the head and wow. Yep, that's a one-hit KO, ladies and gentlemen. You know, in some ways I actually applaud FromSoft for trying something different with the dragon boss. We faced quite a few of those across the series, so it's great for them to give a fresh spin on it. It just sucks that it wasn't a challenge at all.
This was a gotcha fight. My chat made this worse than it needed to be. But I agree. Any fight that you could just one-shot needs to be down here. This one does deserve to be right after Deacons. Okay. This fight is not easy if you didn't do side quests. It's not. I'm going to guess he did Onion Bro. And I'm going to guess that's why the difficulty is so easy. Because it was for me too. But without Onion Bro, Yorm's kind of a dick. So this is one of those conditional fights.
Speaking of fights that were disappointing in terms of challenge, we've got Yorm. In the intro cutscene, they really hype up the Lords of Cinder, ending with a badass flaming giant. So when I got to the fight, I was super excited to finally face off against him. There's no way it can be as bad as the last giant in Giant Lore. This is gonna be epic. And in a way, it really was. The freaking Storm Ruler, are you serious? Hell yeah. I love how many throwbacks there are in this game. It feels like they took the best bits of all four and made a love letter to Souls fans. But fan service doesn't always work out for the better, and even though it's great seeing the Storm Ruler, it absolutely obliterates Yorm. It only takes 5 hits, and those hits can be at range, they stun him for quite a bit, and he's also really easy to dodge. So while I was ridiculously satisfied with the weapon, the battle itself is sorely lacking.
Again, conditionally, right? FromSoft does a really, really good job on giving you ways to complete this. Kind of like if you're going to play through a base playthrough of an RPG, if you're going to play through it with a modified hard mode, or if you're going to play through it with, you know, Sin Unleashed or Zychronic's Dragoon modifier. You can pick your poison with some of these bosses. The straight up encounter with Yorm is actually pretty tedious. It does get difficult because of his movements, and he can turn on a dime for being a giant somehow. If you have Onion Bro and he has the Storm Sword, or if you run back and pick it up, or if your chat are complete dickheads and they don't tell you that that fucking weapon just so happens to be sitting back there by Yorm, and you have to fight it straight up, whole different story for this fight. Could easily put it up into at least like the 50% or the top 50% of these fights. In this situation, there are two ways to make this fight go a lot faster. One is to pick up the sword. The second is to do Onion Bro's storyline, so he's using that sword against Yorm, which is also super easy. Kind of interesting he didn't go that route. Is like, for anybody's first playthrough, the one thing everybody in chat wants you to do is the Onion Bro side quest. Interesting that someone didn't do that. Bullshit. This is the first boss, right? This is the first boss. If you have never played a Souls game before, if you have never looked at Souls videos, if you have no idea what you're doing, this fight sucks. I don't agree with VORDT being down here if it's a first playthrough for literally anyone. What's up, Vlad? Literally anyone. Because for the first time you're playing any of these games and you've never played a Souls game before, this is your first, like, run through after the judge. So this is like your first real boss. Both VORDT and the judge should be a little higher up because you are literally learning how the game fucking works at this point.
And so we start our run on the easy early game bosses. I think most would agree that in terms of bosses, the game isn't so bad until you reach your first Lord of Cinder.
No, it wasn't. It was fucking horrible. Is he serious? If you've played Souls before, or if you've played like Neo or something else that has faster pace, need to react to boss, need to like be on your toes, sure. If this is your first playthrough of any Souls game, no, the fucking judge and VORDT are insanely hard. Must be asking speedrunners. I mean, maybe, but like, if it's your first run at this game, yo.
VORDT reminds me heavily of something you might actually see early in Bloodborne, at least from a mechanic perspective.
If you've played Bloodborne, you already have like the Soulsborne stuff down. Not the same. Okay, so for his video, I mean, for him, because this is all super like, every boss is slow after Neo, that's also facts. But like, if you've come from Bloodborne, if you've come from Dark Souls 1, this being his opinion based on his community knowing exactly what he did for these fights, whole different ballgame. For someone like me who'd never played a Souls game before, this fight was not fucking easy.
He's big and he's easy to get under. If you do, you'll have no problem on your way to 50% health. Once there, however, VORDT gets incredibly more aggressive. The most deadly attack he has in his arsenal is this charge. He just goes apeshit and starts charging around the arena 3 to 4 times. If you get stun locked by this, prepare to die. Otherwise, the fight is still a matter of getting under him and punishing. If you can do that, you should have no problem here.
Should. Emphasis on should. I don't even want to talk about this. This list is so fucked right now. This is like prior experience. You have to have prior experience, or you have to not be literally getting absorbed by the game. Any of these guys in chat, December Clark, Vlad, Proto, all of these guys that saw me do these early fights were dying laughing at my dumbass because I didn't pick up on like the gimmick. A lot of your first Souls playthrough, this was when I played Dark Souls 3, it was my first Souls game ever. You just don't catch on to some of this stuff when the game does such a good job absorbing you and putting your head in the game. So you are like just on this interesting tilt-a-whirl of all of these different things that you need to pay attention to, and you miss certain things. He's going to say the fight's easy if you pay attention. I'm going to say, if you're drinking for every death on your first playthrough through Dark Souls 3, you don't know what the fucking gimmick is.
Honestly, I think I had more trouble finding this boss than I actually did killing it. No joke, I was lost looking for this sage for the longest time. And I was actually kind of shocked when I walked into the arena, so I kind of just walked up to it and died like an idiot. Once I found my way back though, it was a different story. The sage has an array of slow charging magic attacks along with one melee strike. That strike does pitiful damage though, so you can kind of just get up in the sage's face and hack away at it. Eventually it'll teleport and then you just rinse and repeat. There is a point in the fight where it spawns clones, but they're slow to attack and easily distinguished by their blue magic compared
by their blue magic. If you have already gone through the swamp, and we'll say being nice about it, you've already died like 24, 25 times. You happen to be drinking 32-ounce mixers of vodka and Red Bull or Captain and Coke or Jack and Coke or whatever I was drinking at that time of playthrough. If you so happen to be a little inebriated running into these, you're not looking at the fucking colors. You're like, that thing kills me, get away from it. That thing kills me, that thing needs to die. And you spend the entire fight chopping down all of the clones to get one shot on the actual crystal sage and then coming back. I'm pretty sure my kill count for this, I'm pretty sure I died 41 times before I killed this boss.
compared to the true sage's purple magic. I don't think it's a bad boss per se, but it is pretty damn easy.
Uh-huh. Okay. GUNDYR. This is your introduction to the entire game, right? This boss needed to be a little shitty to prepare you for what was coming afterwards. I actually think this is a pretty good spot for a GUNDYR. Because, like, yes, I got thumped, but if you're watching a first-time playthrough on Twitch and you're watching any streamer attempt this and they've never played a Souls game before, like, this fight's hilarious. Even me going back and watching the VOD of me fighting GUNDYR, I was like, oh my god. Like, this was probably a 20, 25 pull to get used to it. Everybody in chat was like, here's your introduction, bud, here's your... And then you learn about the phases of the boss. This is probably pretty fair for GUNDYR.
This boss is such a great intro to the experience ahead. I
Agreed.
love that you actually have to pull the sword to initiate what you know is about to be your first boss. So how does the fight stack up? It's a decent challenge for the early game, but with a low health pool and heavily telegraphed attacks, it's mostly a breeze for series veterans.
For series veterans, yes. For people that, again, if you're stepping into your first playthrough for this, and even if you have played before, the shoulder charge that GUNDYR does in between some of his combos that are really easily telegraphed, if you're not paying attention to his hands, this is a fight that I had to literally like pick a body part and try to focus on that for telegraphing, not the weapon. if you have to watch what GUNDYR is doing with his hands, because that charge is the one that catches you off guard, and it sets you up for one of his bigger wombo combos, because you're literally fucked unless you get lucky with like 1 or 2 frames and roll out of the way. But in terms of where this is at, this was a great introduction, because this thing fucked me up a couple of times.
The one real challenge in this fight for me was the shock. I actually panicked when I saw his transformation. Most bosses in Soulsborne have some kind of beast mode that they enter when they reach a certain HP level, but I don't ever remember reacting like, wow, what an epic duel with the warrior. I am loving this, to, oh my god, what is spewing out of this man?
Now, on going back and looking at the video of the kill for GUNDYR, I noticed that this transformation takes forever. If you're smart and you jump in and start swinging, you can actually take some time off this fight. But he's right. The shock of everyone in chat going, here comes round 2, and you're like, what the fuck, I just beat the guy. And then this happens, and it's big, and it's a big, like, massive transformation. And the swings and stuff become insanely hard to telegraph.
Still, thank
when it gets
God
there.
this kind of fight is early in the game, because if he had a more complex moveset and higher aggression, this would be a damn tough fight.
Yeah. Being an MMO player helps a lot in Souls. I would agree with that too. And I think this is a good spot for Cursor out of Greatwood. This fight was only, we had some bugs for this fight. Like, we had times when the thing didn't drop, but I did better personally with like the really big, dumb, over the top boss encounters where it was like big swings, big charged attacks. I did much better with those. This fight was really no different, except for, again, this is like what Vlad said, having the MMO background and seeing a bunch of little ads spawning around at the same time that can put little pop shots of damage on you, and having the big boss fight that you still have to think about. This was like a raid, essentially. You had to look at this like a raid fight. Where's your priority damage gotta go, and how can you deal with more whelps? Deal with it. That kind of situation.
Maybe I'm super oblivious, but this boss's entrance also scared the shit out of me. I'm just slaughtering these dudes, maybe expecting some kind of boss like the DEACONS, then the tree I thought was background scenery came to life. After getting over the initial shock, I went to work on his ball sacks. Yeah, I mean, what would you call them? I find that less gross than fungus-grown, rotted, pus-filled mucus orbs. Yeah, this boss is pretty gross. His favorite attack is slamming his ass into the ground while shitting out acid.
Yeah. I just take out the guy with the hook and don't bother with the other enemies unless they start attacking me. Well, a lot of it is, as long as you are rotating and moving, the Greatwood is actually going to start to try to, like, he tries to line you up. As he moves, he'll knock down some of the other ads. Now, your first time seeing this fight, you don't know that. But, like, he actually kills those ads in one shot when he does some of the dumb shit that he does for his fight mechanics. And if you don't pick up on that, you have to, like, isolate, okay, that one ad does more damage than the other ones, or are the little guys close to me? In terms of how the fight was put together, it's actually a really nice fight. It's just a matter of, can you focus on what needs to matter? And I 100% agree with him. Like, this fight felt kind of icky.
And eventually the ground gives way under the weight of his nastiness.
And yes, I just said icky.
This was actually pretty cool, but that wears off quickly once his broken balls give birth to a fleshy arm. I'm sorry if I'm being too descriptive, but this boss really just made me want to vomit.
Yeah.
But hey, at least he's pretty easy. That, and I don't think anything will ever be worse than unending relief of load.
You're right. This one's in the appropriate spot just because of what happens after you kill the fight. You don't know how you're supposed to kill it, but this was one of the fights in Souls that I think was more lore-driven than it was supposed to be difficult. This is supposed to be giving you a lot of context, and if you're not paying attention to it, you just ran through, when you figure it out, you're like, oh, that fight was easy. But there's a lot of lore wrapped up in this fight, too. So if you don't pay attention to both levels of that, this fight was the one when in my playthrough that I realized there was a lot more to Souls than I was aware of. And that was kind of fucking awesome. That was kind of like the step into finding Vadi's videos and trying to figure out what the hell these fights were about. Yes, this fight was kind of easy, but yes, there was a curve in trying to figure out how to actually make the fight easier. So this is a fair ranking for WOLNIR.
To round out the early game easy bosses, we've got WOLNIR. Now I know, some people find this boss crazy easy, but he did make it almost to the halfway point. So I feel a little less embarrassed to admit this was the first boss I struggled with in a big way. Now, was my struggle because this boss has hard to dodge hits or small Estus windows? Nah, it's because this boss is a leaking poison that will kill you faster than you can blink if you aren't careful. And I'll admit it was 100% my fault because I was being way too greedy in the poison. But I just wanted this dude to die already. Why? Well, he isn't all that fun to fight, honestly. You spend most of the battle chasing his arms around the arena and making sure you don't get stuck in the poison, because all you actually have to do to win is hit those golden bracelets about 5 to 10 times each, and then he just dies.
But like the fact that you don't know that, that's more really good fight development from FromSoft too, right? Because like you don't know that. When the second one breaks and you're like, oh, that was why I actually really liked this fight. Not just the lore relevance, but like it was like, oh, here's the gimmick. When you figure out the gimmick for some of these fights, I think they become a little more easy. But up until that point, like it's again, big, over the top, scary boss fight. The poisons will kill you. He rushes at one point and takes ground away. And if you don't get this done quick, like it becomes something that's a little more difficult to deal with. So it was still a pretty good fight. I like that he put it near the middle for this one.
So I'd say this isn't as much a battle against tough mechanics, but more like a battle to keep your patience in check.
I one-shot this fight. On my first time playing a Souls game ever, this was one shot. I was more or less sober. The big bosses, like I said earlier, the big over-the-top, like telegraphed, I don't know, like the bigger bosses are easier to telegraph in my opinion. And I one-shot this fight. A lot of people were like, oh, he looked up a video. He had to have cheated for this fight because I dropped it in one pull. But like, it wasn't a hard fight. And even when it got gross, he started getting frantic and did his like next level power up and started to get angry. Right after he spiked that baby, I feel like it actually got easier to mitigate because the rage in the movements were like over committing to a lot of the moves that OCEIROS was doing. Or OCEIROS, or I think it's OCEIROS.
OCEIROS is a boss I felt it's a little early to make an opinion on in terms of lore. He's very vocal throughout the whole fight, screaming about his baby Ocelot, eventually going ham if you do enough damage. Though maybe if he spent less time ranting about his lost child and more time posing an actual challenge, this would be a better fight. I can't really say much for his moves because I spent most of the fight spanking that ass. Yeah, you remember the golden rule for beast bosses? Well, it definitely applies to this dude.
He's 100% right on this one too. Because if you let OCEIROS get past you and then you use a lot of your stamina to engage the boss after it overcommitted, the fight was really, really easy, like in my opinion. In fact, I would almost put this back a couple of spots.
I feel like to form a full opinion on the boss, I need a couple more attempts on him, but the early impressions are that he hits decently hard but leaves immensely large windows for you to attack. That makes him a bit high risk, high reward, and I think the middle of the pack is a good spot for him.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, and I wasn't really high risking. I was just letting the boss overcompensate with the moves. And after you get past the 50% mark, all of them are big shriek, here I come. Like literally the move set was, I'm going to announce before I rush that way. And it was really, really easy for me. Yeah. Breakdown for this fight was big, slow, old demon. Lots of interesting lore attached with this one, though, too. Big, slow mover, like room encapsulating attacks. You had to kind of figure out your range. This was one of the first fights that I had to, I realized that the distance from the boss would either increase or decrease some of the difficulty for some of the fights. This kind of set you up for success after you figured out how to fight the old Demon King for a first-time Souls player. Because you didn't forget what you learned on this fight. I died a lot on this fight, but going back and looking at it, I may have made it a little harder than I needed to because of the distance from the boss.
The old Demon King reminds me very heavily of the Demon Fire Sage from Dark Souls. Sure, he's got some different moves, like these really cool pulsating AoE attacks, but come on. It's just another big beast dude with a large mace weapon. That doesn't mean he isn't a decent challenge, though. He's got a lot of fire damage follow-ups to his swings, and the aforementioned AoE attacks can do some great damage if you're caught off guard. Other than that, there really isn't much to him. He actually ranked 10th in votes for easiest and hardest boss, so I think he can be considered the average baseline for Dark Souls 3 boss difficulty. I think I definitely agree with that because I didn't struggle much with the fights to the point on this list. The fights to come, though...
And also, what I want to say about this fight specifically, this is a really good spot for it. I would have put this right in the middle of the pack. I did like how as you progress through the fight, he did get intense. He did get like super overpowered, just like some of the other fights in Souls 3 did, where like they have another power level. But this guy ran out of power. This is a lore toss boss. Like they were giving a nod to this Demon King situation. The room itself, everything was very heavily wrapped in lore. So this was just a cool fight in general. I had a lot of fun with this fight. Did not have so much fun with like the area leading up to this fight. But this, again, this boss really helped me out on later fights because of how it was constructed. So I really appreciate it for that. This fight kicked my ass. Definitely top 10. This fight kicked my ass. For a boss that's this big, as I just said, like the big, dumb, over-the-top bosses, the butterfly ranged, and then him with the moveset being tight and hard to telegraph right off the get-go, and the run back for this sucked. Even with the shortcuts, the run back for this sucked. But this is a pretty fair spot for this fight. I really, really did enjoy it, and I used his weapon throughout like the rest of the game.
What an awesome fight! If you've noticed up to this point, most of the easier bosses were also considered some of the worst. Well, from here on out, we've got the best of the bunch. And to kick that off, we got a throwback to the legendary Ornstein. Freaking amazing! It's hard not to compare this fight to Dark Souls 2 with the old DRAGONSLAYER. That fight rehashed pretty much the same boss from Dark Souls with half the fun. This fight reinvents the boss with a unique way to totally throw the player off. Instead of a fast warrior with a lightning spear, you get a heavy battle axe and a great shield. The battle axe isn't the most difficult thing to dodge due to the major telegraphing, but I had a really hard time avoiding the shield bashes.
And that's what I'm talking about. So it was tight. So again, I already brought that up for me personally. Like I got to the point where I was watching GUNDYR's hands, or I was looking at like midsections or how the boss was facing, or like you were picking up on certain telegraph difficulties. Having the shield in front of this armor, the charge and the backhands came as kind of a surprise. Obviously, when the Great Axe started moving, it was like, okay, this is about to get weird. He slams into the ground. He takes a second to posture himself before the lightning blast, so you know you have to get away from him. But that shield, the mechanics for the shield in the fight made it difficult. And one of the shield rush abilities would literally drop kick your dumbass completely off this platform. I got shot off of this like the boss was literally punting me off the platform multiple times. And knowing that you have to stay with that, you know, because you see this in this freeze frame right up here, these butterflies are flying around shooting you the entire time too. So it really puts you in a shit position in almost the entire fight, which was fun, but really, really difficult too.
So while the fight with the armor is a nice challenge, that's bumped up even further by the dragon wispy thing over here that shoots fire at you from a distance. That makes the fight quite a bit more difficult as you have a lot more to dodge. Definitely a solid fight and certainly one of the more memorable ones for me.
Good fight though. Oh! This may very well be one of my top 3 encounters in this game. Quite easily, Abyss Watchers was difficult. There was moving parts that you had to pay attention to. If you didn't pay attention to the gimmick of Red Eyes fighting with you, like this fight just was fun. It was fast. It got faster at the fucking changeover. The boss was very, very good at telegraphing, but also like making really good use of the mechanics for the fight. I don't know what he's got for like 7, 6, and 5, but for me, this is definitely a top 3 or 4 fight for Dark Souls 3. Insanely fun, insane learning curve, very high speed, and just overall, the difficulty ramp when you get to Abyss Watchers is massive. Because it was like, you've played the game up to this point, you've gotten used to some of the slower fights. We aren't to armor yet. This was before that because it's in Baron's Keep. And like, this difficulty step up getting to Abyss Watchers was massive. And it's one of the Souls of Cinder. It was just a really, really awesome fight.
Do you remember how I mentioned the game's bosses are pretty easy up until the first Lord of Cinder? Well, here we go. The Abyss Watchers are easily the hardest early game challenge. When you walk into the arena, you'll be greeted by one Watcher. His moveset is eerily similar of another beloved series boss. About 20 seconds into your intense duel, another one joins the fray. Damn, this is gonna be brutal. One was hard enough. A third one? Are you kidding me? Wait, is that Red Eyes fighting for me? Yeah, that's right. In a big twist on the tradition of being outnumbered in a boss fight, you actually get help from the boss himself this time. I found it easiest to be highly aggressive against the boss watcher until his buddy shows up. Then you should just play highly defensive until your partner shows up. At that point, go full on aggressive against both of your foes. Just watch out for your friend as he can actually hurt you too.
Yeah, that was the learning curve for it. So it actually lulls you into a sense of safety. You see Red Eyes attacking and engaging the other two bosses. They can kill him pretty quick. So you're trying to rush in thinking, okay, they're paying attention to him. Red Eyes will turn and backhand your ass too. So a lot of this was playing it very, 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 very safely and making sure that you didn't overcommit. Yo, Sound, how's it going? What's going on, ITD? What's happening, man? Doing some interesting stuff today, making some YouTube content on Twitch. So you guys are all privy to seeing the preview for what's about to be up on YouTube. But I really liked the dynamic for this fight. I really, really liked that you had to learn what your distances were. And then when it went to complete psycho mode, it was like the fight just stepped up and anteed. And you really had to be careful with the movesets. But this had some interesting mechanics, and the lore for this was fucking awesome. Like, for a first, like, actual main boss fight, this was just crazy.
Once they're down, I breathed a sigh of relief. Only to realize that's part one. Coming back to life and brimming with Cinder, the real Watcher fight begins. Yeah,
so, again, if you're playing this game for the first time, I can't say this enough. Chat lies. Chat lies. Now, my channel is built on a bunch of hardened RPG veterans that have played a bunch of hard modes, have played games at extreme max difficulty, and they want to see you go through what they did. I completely understand that, and I agree. I've done it too. I've got on some first-time playthroughs. It's BS. So you learn to parry, right? Like, my chat and my community for the RPG side of things, and for the Souls group, they do get off on suffering. And most people that are Souls veterans have suffered, and they want you to experience the same thing that they did. Chat lies. So when chat was, after I got the first Watchers down, they were like, you did it, grats, bro. Emotes went everywhere. And then chat got quiet. And I was like, wait, what? That was good development from FromSoft. And that was, holy shit, my chat's toxic. Because I thought I won. And it took me a lot of pulls to even get to the second phase. So the fact that I was trying to, like, estimate how many Estus I had left, how many I had to use, how much damage I could take, and then seeing if there was a second phase, holy shit, did that catch me off guard. And chat did a good job making me feel comfortable right up until that happened.
This fight is similar to the beginning, except there's flaming AoE, more aggression, and harder hits. No doubt this is one of the harder fights in the game for me, but it's also unique, fun, and absolutely gives a feeling of accomplishment once you overcome the challenge.
I 100% agree with him. Like, again, the difficulty ramp from the other fights leading up to Abyss Watchers was not the same. This fight took a lot of different things that you haven't seen yet if it's your first time playing a Souls game, which it was for mine for Dark Souls 3, and gives you an entire spin on what to expect, what you think you know, how to approach a fight, having lore in the fight, having somebody helping you in the fight, which can also hurt you. This just threw a bunch of concepts that haven't been presented yet in the game, which really increase the difficulty curve. And yeah, just like chat saying, the music. This was the first time that I actually had to sit back watching the replay and be like, yo. It's something that the RPG guys give a lot of credit to boss fights throughout, like, classic RPGs and even newer RPGs. The compositions for the fights. This one specifically, like, you felt like you were doing something fucking epic. And it really just ramped my memory of this fight. And that's why, for me, this would be one of the top 4 fights. Especially in terms of hard as well, because you were not ready. You were not prepared for what Abyss Watchers was going to do for you and do to you. No. Champion GUNDYR definitely before Abyss Watchers. I feel like those are flipped. Like, if you made it through this part of the game and you've done any side content at all, by the time I got to GUNDYR and everyone was like, it's the real judge fight, was not super impressed with this fight. It was not, in my opinion, as difficult as the first run through because you're learning. And at this point in the game, your senses are starting to become very honed for Dark Souls 3. I still feel like your first run-in with Watchers would have been a lot more difficult than the champion fight. Yeah. And if you parry, which, again, back to what I said, if you've already gone through the other main bosses, like Pontiff, if you already have a way to parry, this fight was a joke. And that's what I'm saying about taking the other kits from the other fights leading up to champion, and then it really just made the fight. If you're using your toolkit, that fight should not have been as difficult.
Okay, for the record, if my votes were the only one that mattered, Champion GUNDYR would at least be in the top 3. What makes him so hard after the tutorial doppelganger went down with relative ease? Let's break it down. 1. He is incredibly aggressive, especially in his buff state. I'm not joking when I say I feel like this boss gives you possibly the least moments of downtime in the entire series. I rarely felt like I was safe to heal, even directly after dodging one of his moves. 2. He should be called Champion Stunlock. This guy has the ability to knock you on the ground and keep you down for so long. I would tap the roll button and I would stay down for what felt like hours. 3. He has possibly my least favorite move in the entire series. Let's take a look. Once buffed, he gains this quick charge attack. Pretty normal. So what's the matter? You would think that when an enemy goes full sprint at you that if you dodged, he would just keep running past you, right? No, this dude...
No, I remember thinking this too. Like, first playthrough, you're like, okay, because a lot of the other fights, when these bosses commit, you have these big, clunky, like, move sets that you can easily telegraph and get around. And yes, Radzik, I am drinking plenty of water. In fact, this is my 3rd glass of 32 ounces of either water or water with Maw, who's a sponsor for our channel. Thanks so much to Maw Energy. But I will give it credit. They did give this fight a lot of life. It only took me like 5 or 6 pulls to kill it, but I did remember feeling like there was very little time for error or mistakes. I also feel like, oh yeah, he was 10 pulls, killed him with no problem. That fight was not hard, in my opinion. I know that's not going to be super popular with a lot of people, but that fight felt like a fucking joke. But this fight was, for as much as it was fast and tight though, because of where you just came from in the game, depending on what you did, I didn't have as much problem with this fight. However, that specific moveset that he's talking about, I can remember being like, okay, I got this. I got this. And then I don't got this because the shoulder charge came after that, or he would backhand. Because your first instinct is to try to get behind a boss like GUNDYR. Getting behind this specific fight didn't turn out well. There was very, very little windows, but you could make, instead of like a 2-shot and then move, it was 1 move and then set up for the next one. You just had to let him commit to whatever move was coming next. And if you got a distance away from him, again, this was one of those fights that the Demon King fight came in very, very handy. The distance from Champion GUNDYR made the fight a different fight. It made it more difficult. If you stayed at a certain proximity, the moveset became very, very, very easy to telegraph. And that was the way to put this fight down.
It would make a professional athlete jealous with how he cuts on a dime at full speed and rails your ass. With all that aside, this boss would have probably been more easy if I had locked on more, but after playing Dark Souls, I felt more comfortable playing Unlocked.
There is very, very few fights in Dark Souls 3 that by not locking, you improve your chance of success. This is not one of those fights. If you do not lock, Champion GUNDYR will make your day terrible because you have to be watching body movements.
One step further, you can actually parry this guy, but I suck at parrying.
I also am drastically bad at most mechanics in Dark Souls. Being as this is my first run-in with Dark Souls, period, that was something that I had to learn. After Pontiff's fight, because that fight became so much easier with parries. If you learn it once, you don't forget it, or at least you shouldn't with Dark Souls, because it will be used again. DJ's familiar with that one? Oh yeah.
But with all that in mind, I
was in the army, bud. Of course I'm familiar with that.
I fucking love this boss. The aggression and elegant moveset he employs reminds me heavily of my favorite bosses in Bloodborne, and this was an adrenaline-filled romp, plain and simple.
And again, for somebody who's never played Bloodborne or any Souls boss, this did, I noticed with fight tempo, Champion GUNDYR kind of set the stage for some of the other stuff that was coming up, but again, I don't believe it was that hard. Oh, properly fight? I mean, like I said, I beat the dragon. I beat the game. In my opinion, beating Midir was winning the game. So, I don't know if I have to properly figure this stuff out, but I do know that different toolkits that you pick up throughout the rest of the game really did benefit you on these later fights. Like, a lot. This is fair. This fight was fucking annoying. This is fair.
More like ALDRICH, creator of my frustration.
Yeah, okay, we agree already.
There was probably no boss in the game I got more pissy with than ALDRICH.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because I had a piss poor strategy. I love playing highly aggressive, even to the point of trading damage, but this boss plays perfectly against that. Many of his attacks, such as the Purple Rain and the Arrow Barrage, will home in on you. While the Purple Rain isn't too bad, those arrows will freaking decimate you in the blink of an eye.
Yeah. This fight was less hard and more frustrating. And I agree with it being this high because the frustration level compounded into how difficult you were making the fight. Because after you learned what you had to do, you still had to deal with things being frustrating and knowing when to just literally run around the arena like an idiot. That's all you could do. Literally all you could do. You had to wait for your windows, and people are impatient. Impatience makes this fight much, much more difficult than it actually is.
This forces you to spend a large majority of the fight avoiding his attacks from a distance, making good use of the pillars. Once you can bait one of his few melee attacks, you're safe to dodge and get some hits in, but those are few and far between.
And if you're not locking after a melee attack, this boss will take that fucking staff it's holding, put it airborne, or pull out its bow. So when you see arms moving, you cannot watch arms to telegraph this fight. That's what screwed me up so bad. Because you don't see ALDRICH switch to the bow. You don't see the hands raising up if you're not paying attention, and they look very similar. So you could be in there just hacking and slashing away at the body, and then not realize that a rain of arrows is coming down to kill you. And get very close to either a transition phase or a kill, and get wiped off the map in a heartbeat. That was part of the frustration part of the fight.
That's where RNG plays a huge role in this fight. Throughout my 8 battles with ALDRICH, there were 1 or 2 where he was pretty melee heavy, and all the rest he...
Yeah, the RNG, this was a very RNG fight. ITDTV is correct with that. The RNG aspect made it more frustrating. And again, when you're frustrated, you make dumb calls in Dark Souls. Dumb greed calls.
He just kept releasing what felt like non-stop arrow barrages. Either way, this fight will definitely test your patience. If you can keep it in check and dodge his spells masterfully, you'll take down this Devourer of Gods.
And again, lore. I actually think the more lore that was wrapped up in these bosses, the more difficult FromSoft made them. And I love that aspect about it, right? Like the more that was attached to these fights, because for those of you guys that have played more than just 1 or 2 Souls, you know that that is Gwendolyn. And that the Devourer has gotten the little prince, or the prince with the actual name or whatever. If you take notification status in the Discord. Maybe? I'll check into it, Hokucho. But I really did like, again, this was a fight of testing your fucking patience, and that's why the fight was so hard. I died an insane amount of times to this. And it was because I got frustrated. Because some of the fights leading up, this was one of the fights that the toolkits that you got from the relevant bosses leading up to ALDRICH didn't work here. So they threw a huge curveball with this fight. The entire kit for the area technically did not help you kill this boss. Your patience did. This fight's top 3 fight me. No. This fight's top 3, fight me.
And so we come to the hardest boss in the game, at least for me. Not only in this game, but I died to the Twin Princes more times than any boss across this entire ranking series. I could make all the excuses for why I struggled the most with this boss, but it really boils down to how badly I sucked at dodging Lorian.
It's everything. It's fucking everything. No, this fight, hands down, outside of the regular fights in the game, like the base game, non-DLC, right? So let me hold this down. Non-DLC and like non-extra. This fight sucked. This fight made you frustrated. This fight's RNG was horseshit. The basic mechanic for the fight was fine. I will give them that. Like the 2-person fucking the fight that was there. But oh my god. The teleportation and not being able to see and telegraph what's coming up next was horseshit. I died more to this fight than any other fight in the goddamn game. Easily. 2 nights on this fight. 2 full streams. Easily. On this fight. Fuck this fight. Top 3.
Sometimes when I was lucky, this guy would be docile, only swing once, maybe twice, and everything would be great. Other times he would just go teleport crazy and absolutely destroy me. But really, the first half of the fight isn't so bad. Lorian leaves large windows after.
But like that attack right there comes out of teleporter, insta smashes. You have to literally be hitting the roll button the second and guessing. And if you're wrong, then it didn't have that attack, and it's the backhand at distance. Fuck, was that frustrating.
Attacking, so if you can dodge efficiently, you're good to go.
Efficiently is not the right word for that. Luckily is. Those are not the same. Efficiency and luck are far, far different. First Black Knight in Dark Souls 1 compared to this list? 2.
But once you defeat him, he's resurrected by LOTHRIC with
Actually, Captain Morgan won that fight, not me.
a full health
And Captain Morgan also made that fight hard, not me.
bar and a new monkey on his back. Now you get shot with homing spells similar to ALDRICH and a larger soul arrow spell. This is all while Lorian is still teleporting around like a madman trying to slaughter you. I could consistently get to this phase, but I just panicked when trying to deal with everything going on.
And that's the other thing. This was a sense of perception fight that they built just to literally screw with you. Just to screw with you. There's so much going on in your actual like operative way to win. Like it evades you at certain points in time because there's so much that has to happen. And this is not just a boss that if you get stung, it's a little damage. 1 shot from Lorian, 1 shot from LOTHRIC, it is like half bar. So this fight was built to make you freak out and completely throw out every basic like fundamental Souls idea that you had for a boss fight and try to get creative. And then you died because you got creative.
The fight only ends once LOTHRIC is dead, and it can be quite a challenge getting him down. But once I did, damn did I jump for joy, and I'm sure many of you out there did too.
Yeah. No, honestly, I still think Watchers and... Honestly, no. I think Watchers and probably GUNDYR and LOTHRIC Lorian are harder than Dancer. Dancer is not a hard fight. Dancer is literally in the game, so chat control new players to go fight Dancer. There's no fucking way Dancer the Boreal Valley is this high. Dancer was easy to run away from. Everything was super telegraphed. The boss itself was super slow. This one deserves to be way closer to the middle because this fight was not difficult. Even if not like maybe right after like Demon King, like that far down, this fight was not hard.
The Dancer is a deceptively difficult boss to overcome. In the beginning, it didn't really seem that bad to me. The boss leaves large windows of opportunity for you to attack, and it seems like you're in for an easy win.
The stalk mechanic for Dancer was what made it super easy. And as soon as like the Beyblade sequence kicks off, it's like, I'm just gonna run over here. This fight was not difficult if you did not let chat troll you into killing the old lady like your first time in the chapel. Fight was not hard.
Then the boss buffs and inevitably unleashes the spin wheel of doom. This has gotta be one of the scariest combos I've ever seen in a game. It lasts for what seems like days, it has massive range, and the dancer tracks you down heavily while doing it. If you don't move, you are surely dead. That move aside, the boss still has some very quick attacks and moves somewhat erratically. It can be difficult to tell when it is and isn't safe to attack.
I mean, not really. I disagree with that. I disagree with that because if you are locked on, which in this video he's not, which I could see the difficulty getting a bunch more nutty if you aren't locked on to dancer. If you are locked on to dancer while you're moving around the room, you, after the first 25 to 30 seconds of the fight, you notice like the shoulders for dancer. The shoulders told. Everything was fluent. So the middle section, torso, and the shoulders were my tell for this fight. If you had the lock on, you saw those big spinning whirly dervish attacks coming, or the quick moves were the shoulders and the torso had to move first, because nothing about dancer was super jerky. Not like champion GUNDYR, where it was like, oh, this dude's like a professional athlete and can literally stop on any dime and turn and crush you. Dancer wasn't like that. It was a very locked frame, and everything had to be a fluent movement. There was no like stop-start mechanics for dancer.
I love it though. A boss that lulls you into a false sense of security then beats you down is a perfect representation of how I think the developers hope the players feel when playing a Souls game. For that, the dancer is one to remember.
I don't know, that one, dancer wasn't tough for us, and honestly for a first time playing any Souls ever being Dark Souls 3, that one, I think that was overrated. That might be a fan favorite, and that's why it's so high for fan service, but like, nah. The thing on the altar, that's the problem. Big facts.
If ever there were a...
Yes! Fuck this fight. Oh, this one's in the perfect spot. Everybody in chat was like, how are you fucking making this so hard? I had a lot of problems with this fight. Again, as I've stated before, the big, dumb, over-the-top, like, big fights, like large monster, big open telegraphs. I had such a hard time with this fight. And I know it's probably easy on paper. I get that, right? I understand that. Everyone can tell me that until they're blue in the fucking face. This fight's easy. I didn't think so. The way that it changes its movesets depending on the weapon means you had to be ready to fight a different boss throughout the boss fight. The changeover with the combo getting nasty. Get hit once, instantly you're airborne and can't do anything about it. DSA? 1 second. Finish my thoughts on this one. Which one do you mean DSA? That one would have definitely been ahead of dancer and probably right behind Abyss Watchers, in my opinion. So after center, that fight was tough, and I liked that fight a lot. But for this one specifically, for Cinder's fight, I understand the telegraphing for people that are very, very, very good. If you got glass cannon, oh, yeah, I figured as much. Of course, but that's the gimmick thing, right? With Cinder, I'm sure that, and everybody said that, the reason you made this harder was because you played sword and board. The reason you're making this so hard is because of when you're dodging. You can easily overcompensate on the Cinder's fight and get punished very quickly, insta-dead, because of the combo that's in here. And Cinder actually like lulls you to sleep to set up for that taint punching combo that comes in, which after you get hit once, you're dead. If you lived, great. The next attack, they switched weapons. Now you're getting hit with ranged. Good luck finding time to Estus. I overall think that this is a very fair place for this fight, being up here near the top. Do I think it's harder than LOTHRIC and LORIAN? Fuck no. But for me, it was difficult.
Perfect fight to conclude a series full of some of the best in gaming. The Soul of Cinder is undoubtedly it. For starters, the battlefield is one of the most memorable in the series. It reeks of all the battles that have been wrought here over the rights to Link the Flame. And that's a perfect setting for what mostly comes down to a PvP-like fight. The catch is, the Soul of Cinder employs an arsenal of so many things from the series. It fights using the Firelink sword as its weapon, it transforms into multiple different weapons like a curved sword, sorcerer's staff, and a spear. He can use pyromancies, sunlight spears, and even has flips reminiscent of the Darkwood Grain Ring. To top it all off, once you defeat him, he summons the strength of Gwyn, the first Lord of Cinder, as a desperate attempt to stop you. This brings out the moveset and music of Gwyn in a moment I think many of us will remember for a long time.
Again, another fight that between the ambient music, circumstance, and the changing of movesets, it did feel like you were fighting a second type of fight. The music for this fight was so fucking insane that like you felt like you were doing something epic. It was well designed. I feel like the movesets were very intricate and very punishing if you got lulled to sleep. If you weren't paying specific attention to what was getting you here in the first place, you were done. This fight wrecked me.
So how's the fight itself? Well, it's pretty damn hard. Yeah, how else did you think a foe that has so many tricks up his sleeve would be? He's got so many different moves to learn, he's crazy aggressive, he has a pretty large health pool if you count both phases, and he does massive damage. The best example of this is the devastating 5-hit combo. If you get hit by even one strike, you're stuck in it for the rest, and this combo hurts. The one redeeming factor that probably kept him from a higher ranking is that he can be stunned. If you do enough damage, he drops to one knee, which gives you an opportunity to wail on him or heal.
And again, even breaking the poise and getting the one knee out of it, the attack right after that, for me, I remember on 3 different occasions, was restart the 5-hit to try to get you before you could roll away, the slam sword in front to get the burst of AoE, or literally that fucking double backflip to get out of range from you and then switch the weapon setup again. The boss was literally like a PvP run-in where it was just trying to catch you off guard. The RNG for it made it difficult, but like the fact that the toolkit for this boss was so huge was insane. Like I honestly, and based on the ranking from this dude here on the internet, another random guy on the internet with 4 million views on his YouTube video, like I don't feel so bad because for me this fight was fucking mental.
Even so, this fight is without question one of the hardest in the game, but also one of the best.
Okay. The difficulty of this fight definitely depends on how insanely toxic your chat is. Yes, I did. Much different fight. And I went over that with its spot on here too. Much different fight without Onion and much different fight without running past and grabbing it. Actually, a pretty difficult fight, honestly. Yorm was pretty tough, depending on circumstance. Pontiff. Focus on Pontiff for a second. Chat let me die about 20 or 30 times before they started talking about the parry stuff. If you parry Pontiff, this fight becomes kind of a joke. If you're bad at parrying, haven't parried the entire game, have to learn how to parry on Pontiff, or if chat is not telling you that parry is a thing, this might easily, base game, be one of the hardest fights in the game. Pontiff without parry, I don't know how many times that would have taken me to kill this fight. The difficulty curve leading up to Pontiff far surpasses the difficulty curve going into Abyss Watchers, in my opinion. Like, yes, there's certain things that make it easy. Yes, the round buckler, whatever, to parry made the fight much more tolerable and easy to take down. But without any of that information from a chat in a first-time playthrough, this fight is a monster. This feels like the end of the game fight. This one, in my opinion, was harder than Cinder's. If you figure out the problem-solving part of this fight, it becomes much easier and can drop down the list. If you're straight up, first time seeing it, first time playing a Souls game, first time engaging this fight, fucking insane. Insane fight. Almost, it literally feels impossible without the right understanding or good support from chat your first time through. It literally feels impossible.
Dear God, I feel lucky making it by Pontiff in 2 tries. I say
Fuck off.
that because I recently faced him on a second playthrough and I must have died at least 10 times.
10?
That's mainly because this fight can be largely trivialized with parrying, but that's something I've never been good at in Souls. So if you're like me and can't parry, get ready for one of the most unforgiving bosses I've ever encountered. Pontiff rivals the Dancer for some of the longest combos I've ever seen.
That's true, because once it starts swinging, and then as soon as you have the replica, as soon as the shade comes out too, and is copying like the most large aggro combo I've ever fucking seen from a boss fight, Sweet Jesus.
Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 hits, and other times this dude just unleashes the beast all over you and hits you 1, 2, 3, 4. Seriously, it feels like it never ends. How on earth are you supposed to dodge all that? Well, you better find a way because this guy is only at the halfway point of the game. Speaking of halfway points, Pontiff will split in 2 halfway through the fight. That's right, you get 2 unrelenting Pontiffs for the price of 1. But in reality, I actually found the second phase makes Pontiff a tiny bit easier.
What?
This is because his shadow will actually telegraph what Pontiff is about to do. This means you can take advantage of this to dodge in a timely manner and get some hits in. Pontiff also seems less aggressive with his doppelganger in tow, so I actually recommend you try not to defeat it because then he goes back to his oppressive self. This is honestly a boss like Gwyn where I almost recommend you learn to parry just for this boss because you'll save yourself some serious beatdowns.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, just like I said, if you are learning to parry on this fight and you successfully pull it off a handful of times, you can kill this fight relatively easy. If you don't have that knowledge, or you don't get it, it doesn't like click for you in the fight, get ready for an ass whooping. Easy 40 deaths, 10 deaths, nah. Like, again, this is part of the Bad Gamer Bias review series. I'm not good at these kind of games at all. And if you're fresh to the Souls or Bloodborne or any Souls-likes, if you're fresh to that and this is your first time playing this game, this fight literally makes you feel like maybe you're not going to make it through this game. Like, it will literally break you mentally. And the fact that it didn't was just because chat really did help me out here in the clutch. I disagree with this. Every fucking list for Souls has Nameless King at like number 1 for the base game. I don't agree with this at all. Big, dumb boss fight. Mechanics that are so telegraphed, it's insane. If you're not, like, not locking for this fight actually made it easier for me. Like, just being aggro at the right times and not getting greedy for this fight, we killed it in fucking, like, 12, 13 pulls. It wasn't that bad. In comparison to LOTHRIC and LORIAN, in comparison to Abyss Watcher's first time through, or Pontiff, nah. Even CINDER. Nameless King for me is not the hardest fight in the playthrough. I don't think that it is anyway. And again, being someone who's not a Bloodborne or Dark Souls like Legionnaire, I didn't play these games when they came out. I still think that this was a lot of, if you got sucked into what was going on in the fight, if you let the fight speed up around you and you weren't focusing on your main damage funneling needs, then you're going to make this fight harder on yourself. But overall, it wasn't that difficult. I don't think it was. And I know that's an unpopular opinion because a lot of people want to make him number 1, but nowhere near as soul-crushing as Pontiff, nowhere near as irritating as ALDRICH and as LOTHRIC and LORIAN. Like, it just wasn't, in my opinion.
And so we finally reached the uncontested hardest boss in Dark Souls 3. The difficulty height for this dude is really over 9,000. And that's a related reference, but we'll get to that. For starters, you don't even get to the meat of the fight right off the bat. First, you gotta face the king while he's riding a freaking dragon. How many fights have looked more intimidating than that right off the bat? So while you balance between lightning strikes, spear slams, and the dragon's flames, you gotta find some time to nail the dragon's face. To be honest, I had the most struggles early on dodging this flame attack. If you don't run away as soon as the dragon flies up, prepare to be fried. But after a little practice, it wasn't so bad taking the dragon down. Then in true Dragon Ball Z fashion, the loss of his comrade propels him to reach new heights of immense power. Just look at this, you're barely able to withstand the force of his strength. And that's a perfect representation for how this fight is about to go. This guy is the encapsulation of every aggressive and hard-hitting boss that's led us here, not to mention his very large health pool.
This is where you need to be locked. I've noticed that watching some of the playthrough footage that he's had so far. Not being locked on NK for this phase is dumb. Being unlocked while the dragon's airborne and trying to like read and listen to where the dragon's at and get a glimpse of what's going on up there helps out. I will agree that focusing on the, like, not having a lock on with the dragon involved made the fight a little easier for me. Not locking here is fucking suicide.
Add that to the fact you've likely spent a ton of Estus just trying to get to the king and you've got a recipe for trouble. However, to play devil's advocate, he does telegraph most of his moves in a generous way. The problem is that with how hard he hits, if you mistime a single roll, you'll likely need to scramble to heal or face defeat. Let's just say there's a reason this guy is optional. If FromSoft is going to conclude Dark Souls, they've got to add some fights that are memorable, and this is one for the difficulty record books. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed ranking the difficulty of the Dark Souls 3 bosses with me. I really do feel like the Dark Souls series is such an enigma. In an era where many games are pandering to the idea of
I'm going to cut him off there because I don't want to use too much of his content and extort the shit out of it because I am going to be putting this on YouTube. Again, these are just the in-game bosses, like the base game stuff. The fact that they didn't touch on Freed or Midir or Gale, those three fights stand so far away from the base game after completing all of the DLC that it's nutty. It is baffling. Sister Freed might be easily, for first-time players, the fight that makes them not even bother going to fight Midir. Might quite easily be the one that will stop you from completing the game in the DLC. Midir himself, also an extremely frustrating fight. So people can argue about the base game bosses for Souls for 3, but like, I'm not kidding you. I still don't think that this list is dead ass. I think LOTHRIC and LORIAN, I think Pontiff, I think based on when you get to them, the Abyss Watchers, and probably CINDER are in that top 4 mark. I don't think NK was that hard. Big, dumb, over-telegraphed fights are really easy for me personally, and that's just because of the RPG background. So I would shuffle NK probably down to number 5 and then put the other fights that we talked about aforementioned in that top slot. And honestly, it's probably a fist fight between LOTHRIC and LORIAN, Cinders, and Pontiff for just overall difficulty and like crushing defeat feels. But again, that's just because of the type of gamer that I am. I didn't think NK was that hard. But again, I like that a lot of these lists are focusing on just the base game because the DLC bosses came from some other hellish creation. They are on an entirely different plane of existence. Now, there are certain fights like that lead up to those big fights, like the two dragons in the Ring City. That was a fun ass fight. That one probably could be on like a greater list, a little higher towards the end here too. But like, dude, Gale, Freed, and Midir. Those 3 fights, in Dark Souls 1 and in Dark Souls 1 Remastered, the DLC fights were another level of hard. Calamite, Manus, those were just insane. The difficulty curve was massive. So, in relativity, I didn't expect the DLC, because I'd heard about those bosses, I didn't expect the DLC to be any different. But, just so everybody is on the understanding, the optional bosses in this game make this list look like this was the beginner's easy mode. Because between those 3 fights, just Freed, Gale, and Midir, that, and even the ways to get to them, a lot of Dark Souls is the journey. A lot of Dark Souls is the environment and the things in the environment against you, right? Not only was the whole DLC just harder in general, just getting there, but those boss fights were something else. If you guys aren't following us on YouTube, the Dark Souls 3, if you hit exclamation point YouTube, you can find us there. But the playlist for Dark Souls 3 is a lot of our kills. That is genuine ecstasy watching some of those fights die. And it's for good reason. 50, 60, 70 pulls on some of those fights. Just bonkers. Difficulty curve went up massively. I don't think, he's showing some Dark Souls 1 fights, I don't think that the bosses were even any sort of difficult outside of just being frustrating and finding the gimmick until you got to the Sanctum Guardian or Artorias or Manus. They were just different levels. The DLC for this game was no fucking different. Not by a long shot. But thank you guys for watching this segment going over Dark Souls 3 bosses, because I do think that some of these are skewed. Fanfare and lore, I think, do a lot mentally to Dark Souls players. So if they become attached to a certain part of the lore, they're going to become attached to that certain boss. Even if they were, say, for instance, you had 5 bosses that were difficulty-wise from FromSoft, all set up in a different way, but they were considered the same level of difficult, I still think that there is some fan service that goes along with some of these votes. And if you're looking at it on the brass, I think NK falls a little bit, and I think that Abyss Watchers, I think that Pontiff, I think that Cinder, and personally LOTHRIC and LORIAN are that like top 5, and then something like NK pops in. Very, very cinematically awesome fight. Great area, good place to, like, everything was well done, but I don't think that it was as hard as the other ones. Not for first-time players. Maybe for people that have some Souls background, 100% can understand that. But, like, for those of us that jumped into this game for the first time, because it was on, like, you know, a greatest hits edition, or it was like, I never played it before, let's go check it out. I think that list becomes very different for first-time players. That's going to end it for this section of the reaction for this, guys. Going to jump into face space really quick so we have an easy place to transition and end from here. Thank you so much for watching, and if you are not liked and subscribed on YouTube, please do. There's the mark. Here's the face space.